I stared at the phone in my hand, watching it ring for the third time that morning. Dr. Patterson's office. Again. My first thought wasn't about the results from last week's routine physical. At 63, after surviving prostate cancer 5 years ago, you learn that certain calls mean something's wrong. My heart started that familiar accelerated rhythm, the one I'd felt in every oncologist's waiting room. Mr. Whitmore, this is Dr. Patterson. I need you to come in today. Can you make 3 o'clock? The way she said it, clipped and urgent, told me everything. I looked across our sunroom, where my wife Natasha was doing yoga, her body moving through poses with the flexibility of someone half her 32 years. We'd been married 8 months. Sometimes I still couldn't believe she'd chosen me. Is it back? I asked quietly, turning away so Natasha wouldn't hear. The cancer. There was a pause. Mr. Whitmore, this isn't about cancer, but I need to see you in person. Today. I made the appointment and spent the next 4 hours in a fog of anxiety. Natasha noticed immediately, of course. She always did. Baby, what's wrong? You've barely touched your lunch. Her hand covered mine, warm and soft. Even after 8 months, her touch still made me feel like I'd won the lottery. Just a follow-up with Dr. Patterson. Nothing serious. The lie came easily. Too easily. At 3 o'clock, I sat in the familiar examination room, the paper crinkling beneath me. Dr. Patterson entered with a manila folder, and I noticed she closed the door more firmly than usual. Robert, I'm going to be direct with you. She sat down, meeting my eyes. Your blood work came back, and we ran a comprehensive panel including reproductive markers. Do you remember the procedure you had in 2019? Before your cancer treatment. I nodded. The sperm banking. You said the chemo might affect my fertility. Yes, but there's something else. She opened the folder. After your prostatectomy in 2020, the surgical complications we discussed, the additional procedures we performed, my stomach tightened. What are you saying? Robert, you're permanently sterile. The surgical damage was extensive. There's no possibility of you fathering children naturally. I should have made this clearer at your 6-month follow-up. But you were single then, and frankly, at 63. She trailed off, then looked at me steadily. You got married recently, didn't you? 8 months ago, I said slowly. My mind was racing ahead, but I couldn't quite reach the conclusion that was forming. I'm asking because these results show elevated HCG levels in your system. That usually indicates close contact with someone who's pregnant. Is your wife? I felt the blood drain from my face. She told me 2 days ago. 14 weeks. I was shocked. But I thought maybe miracles happen, right? Dr. Patterson's expression was a mixture of compassion and concern. Robert, there's no miracle here. You cannot father children. If your wife is pregnant, you need to find out whose baby it really is. I don't remember driving home. I must have because suddenly I was sitting in my car, in our driveway in Westchester, staring at the Colonial we'd bought together 6 months ago. She'd wanted something traditional, family-friendly. I'd been so happy to give it to her. The ultrasound photos were on our refrigerator, held by magnets shaped like baby bottles. I walked past them into my study and closed the door. Then I did what any man would do. I sat at my desk, and I fell apart. Natasha was supposed to be at her book club. That's what she'd told me anyway. Now, sitting in the silence, I realized I couldn't remember the last time she'd actually talked about the books. Or the friends. She'd been so busy lately, so many commitments. Garden club on Thursdays, charity events on Saturdays, yoga every morning at that expensive studio in Manhattan. I met Natasha at a gallery opening in Soho. I'd gone alone recently, cleared by my oncologist, trying to rejoin life after 2 years of survival mode. She was studying a painting, and when she turned to ask my opinion, her smile made me forget the 28 years between us. She was brilliant, cultured, and inexplicably interested in me. We married 4 months after we met. Everyone warned me it was too fast. My daughter, Catherine, 35 and living in Seattle, had been particularly vocal. "Dad, you barely know her. What's the rush?" But I was lonely. My wife of 38 years had died 3 years earlier, and the cancer fight had left me feeling mortal. Natasha made me feel alive again. Now I pulled out my phone and looked at the ultrasound photo she'd texted me 3 days ago. "Our miracle baby," she'd written. I can't believe it, but the doctor confirmed it. "We're having a baby, Robert." I'd been so overwhelmed I hadn't asked basic questions. Which doctor? When was her first appointment? Could I come to the next one? She'd deflected everything. "Let me handle the medical stuff, baby. You just focus on being excited." I opened my laptop and searched for the file where I kept our shared calendar. Natasha had insisted we sync everything when we got married. "So we never miss each other's important moments," she'd said. But now scrolling through, I saw gaps, large ones. Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 to 5 marked as personal time. My hands were shaking as I called Catherine. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Katie, I need you to be honest with me. When Natasha called you last week to share the news about the baby, what did she say exactly?" There was a long pause. "Dad, Natasha didn't call me. I found out from your voicemail. I tried calling you back 3 times. I closed my eyes. "Katie, I need your help. I need you to not ask questions yet, but I need someone I can trust. Can you fly out this weekend? I'm booking a flight right now." That night, Natasha made my favorite dinner osso buco. She was radiant, talking about nursery colors and baby names. I watched her across the table, this beautiful woman who'd brought joy back into my life, and tried to reconcile her with the impossibility Dr. Patterson had described. "Darling, I was thinking," I said carefully. "I'd love to come to your next OB appointment. When is it?" Something flickered across her face. "Oh, it's during your golf day. I scheduled it for Tuesday. You know you never miss your Tuesday game with the guys." I hadn't played golf in 3 weeks. She knew that. I'd complained about the shoulder pain that was keeping me off the course. "I can skip golf," I said. No, I don't want you to change your routine for me. Besides, it's just a routine checkup." She got up and kissed my forehead. "You're so sweet to worry, but I'm fine. We're fine." After she went to bed, I sat in my study until 2 in the morning. I knew what I had to do, but part of me resisted. This was my wife, the woman I'd promised to trust and honor. But Dr. Patterson's words kept echoing, "You cannot father children." The next morning, while Natasha was at her yoga class, I called a number my attorney had given me once years ago. A private investigator named Marcus Reed. "Mr. Whitmore, before we go any further, I need to ask you, are you sure you want to do this? Because once you know, you can't unknow." "I'm sure," I said, though I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Marcus was thorough. Within 2 days, he had a preliminary report. Natasha wasn't attending yoga classes. She was meeting someone at an apartment in Murray Hill. Always on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. The same apartment. "Do you want to know who?" Marcus asked. "Yes." "His name is Dominic Castellano, age 35, works in private equity. Been at that apartment for 3 years. Based on surveillance, I'd estimate he and your wife have been seeing each other for at least 6 months. I hung up and vomited in the bathroom off my study. Catherine arrived Friday night. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug. "Dad, what happened?" I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "We need to search the house," she finally said. "Katie, I can't." "Yes, you can. Dad, if what you're saying is true, She's not who you think she is. We need to know the extent of this." We waited until Sunday, when Natasha said she was meeting her sister for brunch. Her sister lived in Boston. The drive alone was 3 hours. Catherine started in our bedroom while I checked the study. I felt sick going through Natasha's things, but I kept Dr. Patterson's words in my mind. In the back of Natasha's closet behind a row of evening gowns I'd never seen her wear, Catherine found a locked box. "Dad, do you have a key for this?" I didn't. Catherine used a hairpin, a trick she said she'd learned in college. Inside was a phone I'd never seen before, ultrasound photos that didn't match the ones on our fridge, and a folder of documents. The first document was a life insurance policy. On me. For $2.5 million. Taken out 3 months after our wedding with Natasha as the sole beneficiary. The second was a lease agreement for the Murray Hill apartment. In Natasha's name. Started 10 months ago, 2 months before we met. The third was a birth certificate. For Natasha Morrison. Not Natasha Volkov, the name she'd told me. Morrison. And her age wasn't 32. It was 37. "Dad, there's something else," Catherine said quietly. She was holding the ultrasound photos. "These dates. The most recent one is dated 3 weeks ago. But look at the progression. This isn't a 14-week pregnancy, this is 5 months." I took the photos with shaking hands. She was right. The baby in these images was far more developed than 14 weeks. Catherine powered on the second phone. It lit up immediately, no passcode. She scrolled through the messages and her face went pale. "Dad, you need to see this." The messages were between Natasha and someone saved as D. The conversation went back 7 months. "When are you going to tell the old man?" "D. Soon. I need him to update the insurance first. He's dragging his feet." "Natasha, we could just move up the timeline." "D. No, we stick to the plan. The baby angle is working. He's completely bought in." "Natasha, there were more. Dozens more. References to the payout after the accident, once he's gone. There were discussions about staging it to look like a fall, a heart attack. Complications from his cancer." Catherine called the police. Detective Sarah Wu arrived within an hour with 2 officers. She read through the messages, examined the documents, and looked at me with something like pity. "Mr. Whitmore, this appears to be a clear case of conspiracy to commit fraud and possibly attempted murder. With your permission, we'd like to set up a controlled confrontation when your wife returns." Natasha came home at 4 o'clock. She was glowing, humming to herself as she set her purse on the hall table. Then she saw me sitting in the living room with Catherine and 3 strangers. "Robert, what's going on?" Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, but something was off. The movement was too stiff, too calculated. "Natasha," I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "When's your next doctor's appointment?" "Tuesday. Darling, I told you. Which doctor?" She blinked. "Dr. Harrison. You know this." I called Dr. Harrison's office. They have no patient named Natasha Whitmore or Natasha Volkov. The color drained from her face. I must have said the wrong name. You know I get confused. Mrs. Whitmore." Detective Wu stepped forward. "I'm Detective Wu with the Westchester Police. We need to ask you some questions about this phone and these documents we found in your possession." What happened next was like watching a mask crack. Natasha's face went through several emotions. Rapid-fire confusion, fear, anger, and finally, something cold and calculating. "I want a lawyer," she said. "That's your right," Detective Wu said. "But I should inform you that we have enough evidence here for arrest warrants, not just for fraud, but conspiracy to commit murder." Natasha laughed, actually laughed. "That's ridiculous. Robert, tell them this is ridiculous. I stood up. My legs felt weak, but I made myself walk over to her. Show me your stomach, Natasha. What? If you're really pregnant, show me. She backed away. Robert, you're being crazy. The police are making you paranoid. Catherine stood up and crossed the room in 3 strides. Before anyone could stop her, she lifted the hem of Natasha's loose blouse. There, strapped around her midsection, was a silicone pregnancy prosthetic. The sound that came out of my mouth wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob. Natasha shoved Catherine away and ran for the door. She didn't make it. One of the officers was faster. The next few hours were a blur. More police arrived. Dominic Castellano was arrested at the Murray Hill apartment. In his place, they found detailed plans for my accident, a trip to our lake house that Natasha had been planning for our anniversary. There was a section of dock that had been deliberately weakened. The plan was for me to fall through, hit my head, and drown. They also found bank statements showing that Natasha Morrison had done this before. Twice. In Florida 12 years ago, she'd married a wealthy widower named Harold Chen. He died in a boating accident after 9 months of marriage. The insurance paid out, but there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. In Arizona 8 years ago, another wealthy older man named Thomas Bradford. He died from a fall down the stairs. Again, the insurance paid out. Again, insufficient evidence. I was the intended third victim. The trial took 9 months. Natasha maintained her innocence throughout, claiming she loved me, that Dominic had manipulated her, that the pregnancy prosthetic was just a desperate attempt to save our marriage because she knew she was infertile. None of it held up against the evidence. She was sentenced to 30 years for conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. Dominic Castellano received 25 years as an accomplice. The insurance company voided the policy and launched their own investigation into the previous deaths. I sold the house in Westchester. Too many ghosts. I bought a smaller place in Connecticut near Catherine and her family. My granddaughter is 8 now, and she likes when I read to her on Saturday mornings. Dr. Patterson called a few months after the trial. I wanted to check in on you, Robert. How are you managing? I'm alive, I said, which is more than I would have been if you hadn't called that day. The blood work probably saved your life. She agreed, though I wish it hadn't been necessary. Some nights I still think about Natasha. Not the criminal, but the woman I thought I'd married. The one who laughed at my terrible jokes and held my hand during old movies. I know now that person never existed. She was a construction carefully built to exploit my loneliness and my fear of dying alone. I've started dating again slowly. I'm honest about my age, my health history, and yes, my trust issues. Last month, I went to dinner with a woman I met at the library. She's 60, widowed, and refreshingly direct. When I told her a sanitized version of my story, she nodded. My second marriage was to a con man, she said. Different scam, same devastation. We're the survivors, Robert. We get to write the next chapter. I think about that often. After the cancer, I thought I'd been given a second chance at life. After Natasha, I realized I'd been given a second chance to learn what really matters. It's not about finding someone to stave off loneliness. It's about building a life where you're not so lonely that you ignore the red flags. Catherine asked me recently if I regretted marrying Natasha. Every day, I said honestly, but I don't regret learning the truth. If Dr. Patterson hadn't told me about the infertility, if I hadn't investigated, Katie, I'd be dead. So no, I don't regret surviving. The last time I saw Natasha was at her sentencing. She looked at me across the courtroom, and for just a moment I saw something that might have been remorse. Or maybe I imagined it. Maybe I needed to imagine it to believe that somewhere in all those lies, there'd been a sliver of genuine feeling. The judge asked if I wanted to give a victim impact statement. I stood up, my hands shaking slightly, and looked at the woman who'd planned to kill me. "You made me feel young again," I said. "You made me feel wanted. For someone who'd spent 2 years fighting cancer and 3 years grieving his wife, that feeling was intoxicating. And you knew that. You knew exactly what you were doing. I hope these 30 years give you time to think about the lives you've destroyed. Not just mine, but Harold's and Thomas's. And I hope that somewhere, somehow, you find whatever it is that's broken inside you that made you capable of this." She didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead, expressionless as they led her away. I'm 64 now. My shoulder's healed enough that I'm back to playing golf on Tuesdays. My cancer's still in remission. I see my therapist every week working through what she calls appropriate trust restoration. Some days are harder than others, but I'm here. I'm alive. And every morning when I wake up in my little house in Connecticut, with my granddaughter's artwork on my refrigerator and Catherine's family just 20 minutes away, I'm grateful. Not for what happened, but for surviving it. Dr. Patterson was right. There was no miracle. But maybe the real miracle was the phone call that saved my life, the daughter who flew across the country to help me, and the stubbornness that made me ask questions when nothing made sense. I've learned that loneliness is painful, but it's not fatal. What Natasha planned for me would have been. And that makes all the difference. Sometimes late at night, I take out that folder of documents the police returned to me after the trial. I look at the false ultrasounds, the fake identity papers, the insurance policy with my death as the payout, and I remind myself, I survived. Not just the cancer, not just the con, but the deepest betrayal imaginable. And tomorrow, I'll wake up again. I'll have coffee with my neighbor, the retired teacher who brings me vegetables from her garden. I'll video call Catherine and hear about my granddaughter's soccer game. I'll go to my book club, the real kind, where we actually discuss the books. I'll live. Because that, in the end, is the best revenge. Not just surviving, but learning to trust again, carefully and wisely. Building a life that doesn't require me to ignore my instincts or overlook red flags just because I'm afraid of being alone. Natasha took 8 months of my life. She won't get another day.